Life has a funny way of throwing you curveballs when you least expect it. I'm Andrea, a PR manager who spent more time in boardrooms than in the dating scene. At 35, my life was a testament to hard work and late nights, not romantic dinners or weekend getaways. But then Michael walked into my life, or more accurately, into my project meeting. Michael was the kind of guy you noticed the moment he entered a room, not because he tried to be the center of attention, but because of his quiet confidence. He was representing our new client, and from our first handshake, I felt a spark that was hard to ignore. We spent weeks working closely, and I found myself looking forward to our meetings more for the chance to chat with him than the actual work. It was crazy. Here I was, a woman who prided herself on her independence, getting butterflies over a business partner. One evening, as we were wrapping up, I made a spur-of-the-moment decision. "Hey, Michael, fancy grabbing dinner?" My treat. "We can celebrate the project's progress." It was a lame excuse, but it was all I could come up with. Michael raised an eyebrow, a small smile playing on his lips. "Dinner, huh? Sure, why not? But let's make it fair, my treat next time." Dinner was a mix of work talk and personal stories. It was easy, comfortable. As the night drew to a close, I knew I didn't want this to be just another work dinner. Gathering all my courage, I blurted out, "Michael, I'm going to be straight with you. I like you. More than just a business partner." There was a moment of silence. Michael looked surprised, then thoughtful. "Andrea, I'm not sure what to say. I like you too, but I've got some baggage. My ex-wife, Laura, let's just say she left a mark. I'm not sure I'm ready to jump into something new." His honesty caught me off guard. "Look, I get it. I'm not asking for a fairy tale here. How about we just see where things go? No pressure." Michael nodded. "All right, Andrea. Let's take it slow." That dinner marked the beginning of something special. We continued to meet, first under the guise of work, then openly as something more. It was refreshing, being with someone who understood the demands of a career yet made time for the little moments. One evening, as we were walking back to our cars after a spontaneous movie date, Michael stopped and looked at me. "Andrea, these past few months have been amazing. I didn't think I could feel this way again after Laura. I want this, us." I smiled, feeling a warmth spread through me. "Me too, Michael. I'm all in." Building a life with Michael felt like we were laying bricks for a foundation that was meant to last. After the initial awkwardness of transitioning from work partners to life partners, we found our rhythm. We moved into my place, a cozy 2-bedroom house that now felt more like a home with Michael's stuff scattered around. One lazy Sunday morning, as we sat with our coffees in the living room, Michael looked around and let out a content sigh. "You know, Andrea, I never thought I'd feel at home so quickly anywhere after, well, you know." I grinned, nudging him with my foot. "Yeah, I know. But hey, look at us now. Making a home out of a house filled with nothing but work files and takeout menus." He chuckled, picking up a stray sock from the floor. "Speaking of which, we really need to work on our domestic skills. I can't even remember the last time we cooked." "Hey, speak for yourself." "I make a mean cereal," I shot back, laughing. It wasn't all smooth sailing, though. Balancing our demanding jobs with our personal life was a juggling act. We'd often find ourselves working late, only to come home to each other, sometimes too exhausted to even talk. One evening, after a particularly grueling day, I flopped down next to Michael on the couch, burying my face in the cushions. "I'm beat. If I see one more email, I'm going to scream." Michael, laptop still open on his lap, glanced at me and closed it with a snap. "That's it. We're taking a break this weekend. No work, no emails. Just you, me, and maybe a little adventure." I lifted my head, intrigued. "An adventure, huh? What did you have in mind?" He wiggled his eyebrows. "How about a road trip? Just hit the road and see where we end up." The idea of just driving off with no particular destination sounded perfect. I'm in. But let's make one rule, no talking about work. Deal? Deal, he agreed, and we shook on it. That weekend, we did just that. We drove to a small beach town a few hours away, spending our days exploring and our nights in a quaint bed and breakfast. It was refreshing, being away from the hustle of our daily lives, reminding us of the simple pleasures we often overlooked. Back home, as we settled into our routine again, it was clear that the little getaway had recharged us. Our conversations shifted from deadlines and meetings to plans for the future, our future. One evening, as we were cleaning up after a rare attempt at cooking dinner together, Michael turned to me, a serious look on his face. Andrea, I've been thinking. We've been doing great, you know, building a life together. I want to make it official. I froze, a soapy dish in hand. Official? You mean, like? Yeah, like marriage. I want you to be my wife, Andrea. I know it's sudden, but I've never been sure about anything. The dish almost slipped from my hands. Michael, are you serious? As a heart attack, he said, his eyes locking with mine. I put the dish down, water and soap suds forgotten, and walked over to him. Yes, I'll marry you. Life with Michael was like a dream until Laura, his ex-wife, decided she wasn't done with him yet. At first, her calls were rare, a nuisance we brushed off. But then, they picked up frequency, each one more demanding than the last. One evening, while Michael and I were trying to enjoy a quiet night in, his phone rang. The caller ID flashed Laura's name, and he sighed heavily before answering. Laura, what is it now? I could only hear his side of the conversation, but his furrowed brow told me it was the same old song and dance. After he hung up, he tossed his phone on the couch, frustration written all over his face. She needs help moving some stuff this weekend. Can you believe that? I frowned, my patience wearing thin. Michael, why does she always turn to you for help? She's got friends, hasn't she? He shrugged, a helpless look in his eyes. I don't know, Andrea. I guess old habits die hard? This wasn't just about old habits, though. Laura's calls became more personal, and she even started reaching out to me, offering unsolicited advice on how to keep Michael happy. The first time she called, I was taken aback. Andrea, it's Laura. I just thought I'd give you a heads up. Michael loves his steak medium rare, not medium. And he hates peas. Thought you should know. I was seething, but I kept my cool. Thanks, Laura. I'll keep that in mind, I said through gritted teeth, before hanging up. It was clear Laura was playing games, trying to wedge herself between us. Her audacity peaked when she started inviting Michael over for dinner for old time's sake. That was the last straw for me. One night, after another one of Laura's invitations, I confronted Michael. This has to stop, Michael. It's us now, not you and her. Why can't she respect that? Michael ran his hands through his hair, looking exhausted. I know. It's just, complicated. Complicated? What's so complicated about telling your ex-wife to back off? He didn't have an answer, and the silence between us grew heavy. It was clear we needed to address the Laura situation head-on if we were going to move forward. The next time Laura called, I answered Michael's phone. Laura, listen. You need to stop calling. Michael is with me now. You had your chance, and you blew it. There was a pause on the other end before Laura's voice came through, sharp as a knife. Oh, I see. So you're answering his phone now? You think you've won him over? This isn't over, honey. I clenched my teeth, anger boiling inside me. No, Laura. It is over. You need to move on and let us live our lives. We hung up, but the damage was done. Laura's intrusions had cast a shadow over our relationship, stirring doubts and insecurities we'd worked hard to overcome. It was a chilly Thursday evening when Laura's latest stunt unfolded. She called Michael, her voice shaky, claiming she was in dire need of help, something about a leaking pipe in her house. Michael looked at me, phone still pressed to his ear, uncertainty in his eyes. She says it's an emergency, Andrea. I feel like we should go, but I want us to handle this together. Are you okay with that? I was tired of her games, but I nodded. Let's do this. But we're setting boundaries today, Michael. This ends now. Armed with a resolve to end Laura's manipulations, we drove to her place. The air between us was tense, a mix of anxiety and determination. As we approached her front door, I could feel my heart pounding. Michael rang the bell, and we waited. The door swung open, and there stood Laura. She wore a revealing outfit and held a glass of wine, a stark contrast to the emergency she had described. Michael's face went from concern to furious in a second. Laura, what the hell is this? You said it was an emergency. Laura's confident demeanor faltered as she looked from Michael to me, her plan unraveling. I thought we could talk, Michael. Just the two of us. I didn't expect you to bring her. I stepped forward, my patience worn thin. Enough, Laura. Your little games end now. We're not doing this anymore. Michael is with me. You need to respect that and move on. Laura's eyes flashed with anger. Move on? How can I move on when you've taken everything from me? Michael was my husband, and you. Michael interrupted, his voice firm. I was your husband, Laura. Past tense. And I left because of your actions, not Andrea's. You need to accept that and stop this nonsense. The ride home was quiet, a time for reflection on the events that had unfolded. When we finally spoke, it was with a sense of relief and a renewed commitment to our relationship. Michael, we can't let anyone or anything come between us again. We need to be a team, always. He nodded, his grip on the steering wheel tightening. You're right, Andrea. I promise, from now on, it's you and me against the world. No more ex-wife drama. Despite the steps we took to protect ourselves, Laura's vendetta against us escalated to a public spectacle that neither Michael nor I could have anticipated. It happened on a night that was supposed to be a celebration of a significant milestone in my career. We were at a downtown restaurant, surrounded by colleagues and friends, the mood light and festive. As we raised our glasses for a toast, the sound of the restaurant door slamming open turned every head in the room. Laura stormed in, her eyes wild with anger, zeroing in on Michael and me. Without hesitation, she began yelling, her voice cutting through the chatter of the room like a knife. Michael, how could you do this to me? And you, she spat, turning her venomous gaze towards me, you homewrecker. The room fell silent, all eyes on us. I felt my face flush with a mix of embarrassment and rage. Michael stood up, his body tense. Laura, get out of here. You're making a scene over nothing. It's over between us, and it's time you accepted that. But Laura wasn't deterred. She continued, her words laced with bitterness. You think you can just replace me? I was his wife. And you, she hissed, pointing a finger at me. You're nothing but a thief. I stood up, my patience exhausted. Laura, enough. You've crossed a line. We've done nothing wrong. You need to leave, now, before we call the police. Her laughter was cold and mocking. Call the police? For what? Telling the truth? Everyone here should know what kind of people you really are. The tension in the air was palpable. My colleagues and friends looked on, some in shock, others with looks of sympathy. It was a humiliating situation, being accused and insulted in front of everyone important to me. Seeing that his words had no effect, Michael grabbed his phone. That's it. I'm calling them. You've gone too far, Laura. As he dialed, Laura seemed to realize the seriousness of the situation. Her defiance wavered for a moment, but then she turned on her heel and stormed out, leaving a trail of shocked silence in her wake. The aftermath of her outburst was a mixture of awkward apologies and whispered conversations. I tried to smooth over the disruption, but the evening was ruined. As we drove home, the weight of the public humiliation settled heavily on my shoulders. "Michael, I can't believe she did that. In front of everyone." My voice was thick with unshed tears. Michael reached over, squeezing my hand. "Andrea, I'm so sorry. I never wanted any of this to affect you like it has. We'll get through this, I promise. Laura's actions tonight, they've crossed a line. We'll make sure she can't do anything like this again." His words were meant to comfort, but the reality was hard to bear. Laura's relentless pursuit to disrupt our lives had reached a new low, and the thought of what she might do next was a constant shadow over our happiness. After the confrontation with Laura, Michael and I thought we had finally put an end to her meddling. Life returned to a semblance of normalcy, and for a brief moment, we allowed ourselves to believe that the drama was behind us. However, Laura wasn't done yet, and the next phase of her vendetta against us was about to unfold in a way we never anticipated. It started one morning as I was heading out to work. I found my car covered in what looked like eggs and flour. It was a mess, and the stench was unbearable. Furious, I stormed back inside to grab Michael. "Michael, you won't believe this. Come look at what's been done to my car," I shouted, my voice shaking with rage. He followed me outside, and the look on his face when he saw the car mirrored my own anger. "What the? Who would do this?" "We both know who's behind this," I said, barely containing my fury. "It's Laura. She's escalating things because we stood up to her." Michael ran his hands through his hair, frustration etched on his face. "This is getting out of hand, Andrea. I'm going to call her right now and put an end to this." "No, Michael. Calling her won't solve anything. She wants to provoke us. We need to think this through and not play into her hands," I countered, trying to think clearly despite the anger boiling inside me. Reluctantly, Michael agreed, and we decided to take the car to get cleaned, hoping that would be the end of it. But deep down, we both knew it was just the beginning. A few days later, things took a turn for the worse. I started receiving anonymous, threatening letters at work, each one more disturbing than the last. I showed them to Michael, my hands trembling as I handed them over. "Look at these, Michael. They're getting sent to my office now. This is serious. We can't just ignore it." Michael's face darkened as he read through the letters. "This is harassment. We need to go to the police. She's not just trying to scare us anymore, she's threatening your safety." The trip to the police station was a blur. We filed a report, but without concrete proof that Laura was behind the letters, there wasn't much they could do. Feeling helpless and frustrated, we returned home, trying to come up with a plan. That night, we sat in silence, the weight of the situation pressing down on us. Michael finally broke the silence, his voice low and determined. "Andrea, I won't let her hurt you. We'll install security cameras around the house. If she tries anything else, we'll have it on record." The installation of the security cameras felt like a small victory, but the sense of security it brought was fleeting. Laura's next move was something we hadn't anticipated, and it hit closer to home than any of us could have imagined. It was a regular weekday when Michael received a call at work from our neighbor, informing us that someone had been lurking around our house. My heart sank as I listened to Michael relay the message. "Andrea, our neighbor just called. Someone's been seen snooping around our house. I'm coming home now. We need to check the footage from the cameras." The rest of the day passed in a haze of worry and fear. When Michael arrived home, we reviewed the footage together, and there she was, Laura, unmistakable in her defiance, caught on camera trespassing on our property. Seeing her there, invading our private space, was the last straw. "That's it, Michael. We have proof now. We're taking this to the police, and we're pressing charges." Michael nodded, his jaw set in determination. "You're right. It ends now. She's gone too far." Our trip back to the police station, this time armed with evidence, marked the turning point in our battle against Laura. We were no longer just defending ourselves, we were taking the fight to her, ready to do whatever it took to reclaim our peace and security. After months of chaos, it all came crashing down for Laura. The day we learned about her gambling debts and her twisted plan to drag us into her mess was the day the tables turned. Michael and I were at the police station, a place that had become all too familiar, when the detective called us into his office. "Sit down, folks. We've got some news about Laura," he began, shuffling papers on his desk. "Turns out, she's knee-deep in debt. Banks are on her tail, and she's been hitting the casinos hard." Michael's expression hardened. "So, what? She thought she could shake us down to cover her losses?" "Looks like it," the detective replied. "She admitted to wanting to get back at you, Michael. Plan A was to win you back. When that tanked, she switched gears to Plan B, make your life hell, hoping you'd pay up to make it stop." I felt a mix of anger and disbelief. "And she thought this would work? That we'd just hand over cash to get rid of her?" The detective leaned back in his chair. "Desperation makes people do crazy things. But we've got her confession, and we're pressing charges. Harassment, threats, attempted blackmail. She's looking at a hefty fine, at the very least." The court day was something out of a movie. Laura, looking defeated, her lawyer whispering last-minute advice. Michael and I, standing firm, ready to see this through. When it was our turn to speak, Michael laid it all out, the stress, the fear, the constant looking over our shoulders. She tried to tear us apart, to use our past against us. But we're not her ATM. We're not fixing her mess. The judge nodded, scribbling notes. When Laura tried to play the sympathy card, the judge wasn't having it. "You exploited personal relationships for financial gain, Miss Stewart. Your actions have consequences." In the end, the gavel came down hard. After reviewing the evidence and hearing both sides, it's clear that Ms. Stewart has engaged in a pattern of harassment against Mr. and Mrs. Johnson. Such behavior cannot be tolerated. Laura's face paled as the judge continued. "Ms. Stewart, you are hereby ordered to cease all contact with Mr. and Mrs. Johnson. Any violation of this order will result in immediate arrest. Furthermore, you are to pay restitution for the damages caused, including the emotional distress inflicted." As the judge pronounced the verdict, a wave of relief washed over me. Michael squeezed my hand, a silent acknowledgement of our hard-fought victory. With the legal battles behind us and Laura no longer a shadow over our lives, Michael and I could finally breathe easy. Our home, once a battleground of stress and tension, was now filled with laughter and plans for the future. One evening, as we were curled up on the sofa with some old movie playing in the background, Michael turned to me, a soft smile on his lips. "You know, Andrea, I've been thinking a lot about us lately. About everything we've been through." I nestled closer, intrigued. "Oh yeah? And what have you concluded from all that thinking?" He chuckled, his arm tightening around me. "That we're pretty damn unstoppable together. We've weathered a storm that would have sunk most ships. Makes me think we can handle just about anything life throws at us." I couldn't help but smile at his analogy. I like the sound of that. "So, Captain, where do we sail next on this unstoppable journey of ours?" Michael's gaze turned thoughtful, his eyes locking with mine. "Well, First Mate Andrea, I was thinking, maybe it's time we expand the crew?" It took me a second to catch his drift, but when I did, my heart skipped a beat. "Are you saying what I think you're saying?" "If you think I'm saying we should start trying for a baby, then yes, you're spot on," he said, his voice filled with a mix of excitement and a hint of nervousness. The idea of starting a family had crossed my mind more than once, especially in the quiet moments when I'd daydream about our future. "Michael, that's the best idea you've ever had. I'm all in." As the weeks turned into months, our excitement only grew. We started preparing in earnest, turning one of the spare rooms into a nursery, reading every parenting book we could get our hands on, and imagining our lives with a little one in tow. One day, as I was painting a mural on the nursery wall, Michael came in, a mock stern look on his face. I leave you alone for 1 hour, and you turn into Picasso. Should I be worried? I stepped back, admiring my handiwork. Only if you don't like elephants. But seriously, Michael, can you believe this? We're really doing this. He wrapped his arms around me from behind, resting his chin on my shoulder. I can. It feels right, Andrea. Like this is exactly where we're supposed to be. And it did. Despite the roller coaster of emotions, the fears, and the excitement, it felt like we were right on track. Our journey had been anything but ordinary, but then again, we were anything but an ordinary couple.
All right, everyone's presentations are done. Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me and began to speak. There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. I'm leaving. After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick! Is something wrong? Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my 2nd year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked. We could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. I will do my best. Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. Did you not hear what I said? I'm sorry. I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, "I'm thirsty." Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children, with zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job, having joined the company wanting to do customer service. "I don't care what they say, I plan to quit anytime," he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look, "To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day." Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. "So, you all get a chance." As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. "Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them." It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. "All right, everyone's presentations are done." "Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something." Nick interrupted me. "There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer." He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. "Still here?" Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. "I'm leaving." I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. "Nick, what's wrong?" Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. Probably Sam. Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself, had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. Do you know how much revenue we get from that company? We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs, gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized. Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason. What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do. I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you. Please. Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, yes. That's Nick for you. Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, I'm very sorry. Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, get his boss here immediately. It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. What is that idiot doing? All right, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next. Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you. I obediently followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was, as the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize. Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. What kind of training are you giving your subordinates? Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed. I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their in. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1: if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread, hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry. Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong. Mike! What have you done? Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. I didn't do anything wrong. You're still saying that? Look at him. Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract? Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go. Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him. There's no way he was pushed aside. Don't make things worse here. He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he? I don't remember that part. I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, I'm moving to the sales department soon. If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it. On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. It's still working hours. Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived. I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. They look good. What are you talking about? These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one? As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay? I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. Yes, I'm inviting my father. That's great. I might invite my parents too. I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hoped to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.